Well, we live in a very thick, foggy information environment. Hard to cut through, hard to pick what you got to watch, hard to believe, hard to know what to believe because there's so much
information, right?
Misinformation and information.
And no one's teaching people actually how to recognize, critically think. So you spent 30 years in military.
Correct.
You were infantry officer,
right?
Intelligence officer. You were a commander in Iraq War.
I wasn't a commander in the Iraq War. I was a team. I guess you could say I was a team commander. So I had 10 guys. So only, but I've been a commander, but not in Iraq. I only had 10 soldiers at any one time.
How is the unit called if there is only 10
soldiers? It was called the...
is it like platoon?
It was General Dayton's Exploitation Brigade. It was the best name is the Iraq Survey Group.
Okay.
It was like a brigade-size unit based out of... basically, it was a DIA unit, Defense Intelligence Agency unit. General Dayton was in command, and I was in one battalion that was basically doing sensitive site exploitation. We were looking for weapons, evidence of weapons of mass destruction.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get into all of that, but
well, there's
first,
nothing to...
Let me welcome you here. It really means a lot that you came and stopped by and that we can do all that.
Great.
You are Lieutenant Colonel.
Colonel.
Okay. So
Polkovnik.
That's exact. It took me for a while to learn the word Colonel because it was something.
It doesn't spell. It doesn't pronounce the way you spell it.
Yeah, and you don't really spend your regular day with such words.
Correct.
So for me, it was something kind of new. So you're really just one rank below general.
One rank below brigadier general. Right.
Okay. What made you join military? Do you have a...
What made me join the army?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, do you have a military background in your family?
My father was in the Navy for 20 years, but mostly it was just interesting to me.
Oh, so it was the way how to get away? Or
it was a way to get away. Exactly. I wanted to travel. I wanted to learn Russian. I wanted to do new and interesting things, and the army seemed like the best way.
Why Russian?
Russia was the big bad guy back in 1985 when I joined, and I grew up in the 70s, where Russia was the bad guy and they invaded Afghanistan. And I always had a strange fascination with Russia just because they had a different alphabet and they were such a big country. And
it's so different, right?
Yeah, they were totally different. And they had a rich culture. And it was puzzling to me. The whole country was just kind of like a puzzle, something to be solved,
So there was no, my grandfather was a World War II veteran or something like that.
No, my father was a World War II veteran. He was in China. He had they picked up a Russian guy trying to get out of China at the end of World War II. And so my father told funny stories about that. And but basically, I just was interested in Russia, and I have no idea why.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So you joined infantry. Was that something that you always wanted to do since you were thinking, maybe I should join to get away? Why infantry?
Well, why infantry is an easy question to answer because the army chose infantry.
Oh, okay.
So
you chose the army.
I chose military intelligence, and they decided for the first 4 years of my officer life to make me an infantryman because they started a program called the Branch Detail Program. So they wanted all of their officers to spend their early career in the combat arms. So the combat arms are armor, infantry, field artillery. So they wanted all their young officers to get exposure to fighting.
The real thing.
Right, the real thing. Not just to become a bureaucrat somewhere.
I mean, majority of people think like that they will become a bureaucrat, but one day I see the reality of war.
Right.
That's like a wake-up call.
Right.
What they really like sign up for, right?
Right.
So let me ask you that. Is it required for commander or officer of any rank to have the experience in a combat, or you can really be just a bureaucrat, as you mentioned, and you can be a general and never seen a combat?
It depends on when, right? So from 1945 to
Vietnam,
through Vietnam and through Korea and your chances of going to Vietnam were pretty high. So generally, it became a point where if you had a Bronze Star from fighting in Vietnam, you were more likely to be promoted. But you didn't have to have that.
Okay.
So then in our current time, if you have fought in one of the Gulf Wars or done expeditionary force missions, say down in Africa as a special forces guy, then you would probably have a better chance of being promoted than if you were, I mean, some people, depending on your job, like the Army has entomologists, people that study bugs, that work in those crazy labs that everyone's talking about, right?
Oh.
So they study bugs and germs and pathogens and things like that, just for the sake of study. So the Army has a lot of jobs like Medical Service Corps or they have journalists. The Army has journalists. So they might never see combat. They might,
okay.
But it's hard.
But those people who are journalists in Army, they will not become a journalist.
They will not become a general.
And then they will not run any operation.
Correct, right. They might become a lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
Yeah, at the most. And then, so they have basically, they call it the needs of the Army. So they need so many combat arms officers, they need so many military intelligence officers, so many logistics officers. Yeah. So it all depends.
Yeah.
So I joined the Army in 1985, and then I went to language school. They taught me Russian for a year. And then I went to a base in Texas where they taught me the tactical things related to knowing Russian, because we have, just like the Russians or the Soviets had, they have people that try to listen into your communications, try to translate documents, things like that. So I went to school for that. And then from there, I went to Germany, and I was at a place called 66 MI Brigade Detachment Hahn, which was near Koblenz in Germany. And my job was to sit and listen to Russian forces,
what's going on
in
the
training
other side.
And what they're doing on the other side.
What could you hear?
Oh, you could hear tactical communication. I mean, it's all in the open, right? So it's
it wasn't coded or anything.
It wasn't
like that.
coded. The tactical stuff was never encrypted. So you would listen in, and so for example, they would have a question: how far does a rocket artillery battery? What's the typical range that they will fire at a target? You know, so when they would announce, attention battery, target number 105, and then they would give like a grid coordinate. Then we could figure out where it was and kind of figure out from a direction finding capability where they're broadcasting from. And then you could sort of get a feel for how far they could shoot, like a T-72. That was the big tank back then, right? Are we being recorded now, by the way?
Yeah, we are recorded the whole time.
Okay, that's what I thought. So the T-72 tank was a big mystery to us. It was had a code word, which I won't tell you, but it was a big collection effort to find out as much as possible about the T-72 tank. So we would be listening to guys in T-72 tanks and tower controllers and trainers, or just a military exercise. So they would all go out and they would, in one of the training areas, like Letzlinger Heide training area, they would go drive around and you would listen and try to figure out how fast does it go, how far does it shoot, how often does it break down.
It's crazy that regular citizens at that time, they had pretty much no idea what's going on. Meanwhile, there were two army literally sitting and listening each other in every little detail possible, trying to figure out what is the other side up to.
Right.
That is nuts. And then on the other side, on both sides, there were just regular citizens who woke up at 4 a.m. and just went to their work. And but there was literally an intelligence war going on, right? Because obviously, if you guys would find some crucial information, you wouldn't just keep it for yourself. You would move it up, and that could lead to maybe, let's say, some international scandal or something like this, that you guys are putting there some illegal weapons or something like that, right?
Right.
That is crazy.
I mean, you could hear something. For example, we had what was called indicators and warnings. So when, for example, if several battalions of the 8th Guards Tank Army suddenly are mobilized and leave their barracks, and the tanks leave and the BMPs leave their motor pool, then you're gonna call up the American Army forces, and you're gonna what's called an alert. You were going to initiate an alert, and all your guys would then go to their tanks, leave their training areas, because they figured that the missiles and the rockets, you didn't have very long if there was a war.
Oh, yeah.
That you had to get out of your barracks and you had to get away from your base.
I mean,
the bases would be the first target.
Was that even possible? If the missile was already on the way?
Luckily, they had ways of telling, just like I'm sure the Soviets did, if there was heightened activity. You know, so when there was heightened activity,
there would be a lot of indicators.
There would be a lot of indicators involved, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't be just waiting on the
right.
You
wouldn't be just like waking up saying, "Oh my gosh, they're coming." Right.
Damn. So when you were there, were you expecting that the Soviet regime is gonna at some point fall down?
Personally,
yeah.
I, as an infantryman, had a great time, but I never believed that they would invade. I believed it would be foolish. I had experience in college playing simulation war games using statistics and things like that, assigning combat power to different types of units. And I always thought, you know, it's always hard for an attacker. Look at Russia now and Ukraine. The attacker they have the initiative, but defenders have a lot of advantages over attackers because they can dig in, they can set up the fire traps, you know, they can set up the minefields, they can set up the obstacles. You know, defenders have a lot of
they can just kill the infrastructure or something like this.
Well, they can take a more I won't say passive, but they can take a defense is always easier than attacking because it's easier to hold land than it is to take land. So I always thought that the Soviets would probably be wise enough to never attack, and I never thought we would attack because for the same reasons. It's, you know, the Soviet Union, Russia, always historically has done very well when it was attacked, but historically has also done very badly when it does the attacking. So you could say, for example, the Finnish War, when the Soviets attacked the Finns, they got their butts handed to them. And they lost maybe 500,000
in such a small area,
soldiers in a little area, and the Finns, basically a bunch of guys on skis, on cross-country skis.
Yeah, but those guys were next level, man. When you see those pictures from there, I'm like, I would be dead, like first hour, like just the amount of snow and the harsh environment is just nuts.
Right, well, they were trained to be in that environment.
Well, they are born there. So.
So when Russia did well was when it was attacked, but it didn't do well at first because, you know, the Nazis, they went pretty far in that first run in that summer of 41. Right. So it was
quite something. But have you expected the Soviet Union will just collapse?
No one,
right?
But I will tell you an interesting story. I had a friend visit me in Germany when I was stationed there, and he had just hitchhiked around. I don't know. He got a visa and he was traveling around East Germany, and he was hitchhiking and taking trains, and his name was Wayne Flieger, and he told me, he said that the people he met over there thought the wall was coming down within a year or two. So they knew that something was happening, according to him. And sure enough, you know, I dismissed it, but he was right. The wall came down right about the same time my son was born, and I was stationed in Aschaffenburg, Germany.
They could feel it.
Yeah, very interesting.
The same way I was talking to people in Czech Republic, and they told me the same thing. They said that the situation was just something that it couldn't hold anymore together.
Right.
They were telling me that there was nothing, really, like nothing was going on. There was no food. Everything just sucked.
Right.
My dad was in Moscow in 1988 as a soldier, because you had to. At the age of 18, 19, they sent him there and then sent him all the way to Caspic Sea, all the way
down to the Caspian. Yeah, wow.
It's just crazy. It's far. He told me it was the longest 1 week ride in a train that he ever accomplished.
Well, funny, because the Caspian Sea is gone now.
Yeah, it's evaporating, right?
Yeah.
But he said that when they went to Moscow, there was literally nothing except pickles and vinegar in a store.
Right.
They had a meat in a cans, but they couldn't find a bread. And he said everybody went to see Lenin, except guys from my base. We were looking for bread in the capital of Soviet socialism paradise.
The workers' utopia.
Yeah, the workers' utopia. So that was quite interesting. It's just mind-blowing to me that all of a sudden, one way how the world functioned for almost 100 years can just suddenly end. And that's it.
It reached the end of its service life.
What was going on in United States, especially in the military, when it just fell apart? Like, what did you guys do? Well,
it was an amazingly different time. You could tell it was transformational, right? So you knew there was something going on. And when the Soviet Union started falling apart, imploding, people were worried, of course, about nuclear war. But then in the end, there was euphoria when the Soviet Union broke up and we were going to start a new world order, right? And everybody was going to live happily ever after.
No wars.
And, no more wars and stuff like that. And of course, people like Václav Havel and others, like Lech Walesa, they were inspirational figures, kind of like Zelensky is an inspirational figure right now. So I would say, actually, this is another transformational moment we're in right now.
Yeah.
But the big difference between then and now is there was an extreme amount of American identity present. There was a sense of we're Americans, we stand for freedom, we're gonna be there, we're gonna fight for freedom, we're going to, communism is bad. It's very different now.
Yes.
Now you have sort of communism light.
It's coming back.
In the force of progressivism and, Antifa type things, which are really leftist organizations that use fascist tactics. And so it's really a different time. There's American identity right now compared to then is very fractured, very splintered.
Very divided, I would say.
And very divided.
Even people like who were born in the US, every time I talk to them, they pretty much are pro things that are proven to be completely wrong based on historical experience, but because they never lived through such a moment, they are in favor of them. Which to me is crazy.
Yes.
You go to Californian colleges.
Yes.
You go to campus and you talk to them, and the people, like my parents, wouldn't even understand what those people are saying.
Yes.
Because hey, what? You are on campus of a college, which is like the most unique ecosystem in our population, because it's the chances you will be born in the country which will allow you to go to university and study the highest possible education is so low that you have no right to complain about anything.
Right. That's very true. People don't realize how blessed they are to be in a place like this compared to, so many other places in the world where, in Germany, for example, you don't get to go to college unless you achieve certain scores on your tests and pass certain milestones. Even in Germany, which we would say is a free country, comparatively, it's not easy to go to university. And yet in the United States, anybody can go. The problem with our universities is they're very detached. This is my opinion now, very detached from our historic traditional culture and the parents and communities that send their children to those universities. The universities tended to become enclaves of leftist thinking, left of center ways. And of course, there's a lot, I hate to say this, there's a lot legitimate to that. America's history is not perfect. America has not always done exactly the right thing. You could cite a lot of examples. Were the bombing campaigns in World War II militarily necessary? And the answer is no, they probably weren't militarily necessary. You don't bomb cities. When you do that, it's like Ukraine now, you just galvanize the population. You make them want to fight harder. Whereas, so our universities became disconnected and I think if most parents knew what their kids were being taught in many universities today, they would probably pull them out.
So you do think it's because they don't know what they are teaching?
I think they know more now than they did, say, 5 years ago. I think its visibility is increased.
I know a lot of Czech immigrants who came here, let's say 50 years ago. One time I was sitting by a bonfire with some of them, and one of them, after probably an hour of silence, when he didn't say anything, said one thing that really stuck with me. He said that he escaped the communism because he didn't want to live in such a system. After this whole thing fell apart, he took his daughter, who was born in the United States, he showed her Eastern Europe. He took her to all those countries on the East to show her, and also on the West to show her difference.
Right.
Now she was completely normal. Then he sent her to college in California. Then she came 4 years later, and she told him he doesn't know what socialist paradise is because the system that he lived in just failed. That wasn't the thing.
It was they weren't really socialist.
They were really socialist.
Right.
He almost started crying when he said, "My own daughter told me I don't know what it is." And he's like, "My family used to own a factory. They took it from us, and she told me that I don't know what it is."
Right.
That's something that I see.
There's a certain level of arrogance that goes along with that.
Exactly.
That you get from a lot of our intellectual, academic types.
Yeah, and I see it more and more in this society, man. It's pretty scary because he told me also one thing is like, where is the next country you would escape to?
Right. I have Italian friends and Ukrainian friends that say the same thing. If the United States goes down, what's left? Where do we go? There's nowhere else to go.
So that's probably like one of the biggest differences between the end of the communist era back then and the new kind of system probably that is like evolving right now, because it's completely different like environment we are living at, and there's really no better state than Florida you can live nowadays.
I know.
Right?
Yes.
Like, right?
Yeah, the free state of Florida.
Free state of Florida, exactly. Right. I really think that this is true, because you can think of Texas or something else, but Florida, man, there's something about Florida. And if you compare Florida and California, that's not even not even the same country. So I don't even understand that the United States like itself is so divided and that people hate each other.
Right.
Because the states, they have such a different values
that
they cannot cooperate or anything.
And the funny thing is, my wife believes that the United States may split up because of this. However, you can find a lot of people in California that think like us, and a lot of people in Florida that think like people from, we would stereotypically say are from California. So we're all intermingled, and it makes it very difficult. How would that happen? How would that happen?
It's not even like a state versus state, but it's cities versus the suburbs or like the county.
Yes. Yeah.
The countryside. Like every time you go out of Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco,
they're normal
Sacramento,
people.
Exactly. Like we did some round trips in California. Every time you go to some smaller town, you will realize that the people out there are very, very similar to people I see out here in Florida. And if you go to Miami, it's nothing like Sarasota.
Correct.
So
nothing like Sarasota.
All right. So the end of 80s was a big moment. Was there a chance that you're gonna be sent to Gulf War at the time?
My brigade was alerted for the Gulf War, but not everybody went. So they took some people to the Gulf War and attached them to the 1st Armored Division, and then other people stayed behind. I was one of the ones that stayed behind. I had just left a mortar platoon. I was a mortar platoon commander at the time. And I was really upset by not going because I wanted to go. But in the end, everything worked out. I went in 2003 is when I went. So the first Gulf War, after that, when Saddam Hussein was crushed, actually it had a downside. I think the Iranians and the Soviet Union at that point realized, and the Chinese for that matter, probably realized it would be very difficult to defeat the United States in the military domain. We just had too much capability. There were books floating around at that time called Total Battle Space Knowledge, Information Dominance. We had visibility on things that those other countries could only dream about. Like, look at right now. Yeah.
Even if you look on the aircraft carriers, like the amount you guys have versus Russia has just one.
Right. And China, I think, has one really good one.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I don't even know how many US has, but it's more than one. I think it's more than all of them.
We have
combined.
11. We have 11, I believe, now combined. We used to have 13. I'm not sure what the number is.
Recently, I was looking on the Italian one, how it looks like. It can carry, I think, only like 20 planes or something.
Correct.
It's like really small. Correct. And then I look on the biggest one in the US, and I'm like, man, it's like completely different level.
A packed, the new Gerald Ford, USS Gerald Ford, can carry close to 90 aircraft on it. It's like a floating...
That's more than the entire I don't even know how many planes my country has, but it's nowhere near this number on this one carrier. So.
Well, that was always the idea. The United States always had a Navy-dominated sort of defensive attitude. We like to project power. After being in the 2 world wars, we decided that we would like to be able to project power. So how do you project power?
Give strength.
Like, for example, we could go off the coast of Kamchatka and probably have air dominance just with a couple aircraft carriers, despite the fact that the Russians would have put in a lot of airplanes. But you go anywhere else in the world, with a couple aircraft carriers, you have air control. Air superiority from the get-go. So that's a lot when you have air superiority. It sets we call that setting the condition. You don't win a war with air power, but you set the conditions for winning with air power.
You have to have the control of the air, otherwise the supplies or nothing works. If they're still gonna attack you and you have no air control, like what you want to accomplish, right? That's pretty much why the Iraqis fell. So I don't want to say easily, but like it could be way harder.
Right.
It would not be done in a month or something.
It would have been harder. Yeah. I mean, the Iraqi there was really only a couple Republican Guard brigades that were actually involved in actual combat with actual mechanized forces. And most of the other Iraqi army, while it was trying to escape, was shot up by the A-10s and the F-16s on trying to get out of Kuwait. So, so air power gives you a lot of things, but it never never puts boots on the ground for you, but it gives you...
it gives you the dominance.
A combat multiplier.
Do you think like the first Gulf War, when you guys pushed Saddam Hussein back from Kuwait, do you think that they just should keep going and take him out for good, or it was a mistake to just stop?
I think it was the right choice to stop. The only problem was it was kind of like France after World War I and Germany. Instead of rehabilitating Iraq, we punished Iraq.
Yeah, with sanctions, like crazy.
Sanctions, right. So we should have made Saddam Hussein, we should have made him our little guy, instead of punishing him all the time. I mean, it was, but hindsight is 20/20. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Look, when we took Iraq in 2003, we didn't realize what we were doing. We thought it would be simple. You take out Saddam Hussein, the Iraqis hold elections, and then everybody lives happily ever after. And what they didn't consider were the Shia, the Sunni, the Kurds, and all the other Ba'athist strap hangers that were in the country, the Saddam loyalists, the terrorists that were within their midst, like proto Al-Qaeda types.
Pavel, our mutual friend who also introduced us, he was here on Sunday and he gave me perfect explanation about Afghanistan. He told me the relationships between the groups, who likes who hates who. He told me the reason. Man, I realized I know nothing about Afghanistan because when he told me that, because he spent there some quite a time, and he was telling me like, why are things the way how they are? I just couldn't believe. And then I'm like realizing there's no way they can have out there such a thing like a Western democracy, but they can have it there by force. If you put a gun barrel to their head and be like, hey, you have to vote or do that, they're gonna do it. But by themselves, the nature of life out there is completely different.
It's completely different. So it's tribal. How many different ethnicities? We call it, in the Soviet Union, they would say, what nationality are you? Well, I'm a Jew. I'm a Ukrainian. I'm a Estonian. So in Afghanistan, there were many, many nationalities by that standard. And they had different languages, and they were spread out throughout the country. You had the Baluchs rather, over there close to Iran, which were essentially Shiite. And then you had Sunni Pashtuns that believed they should run everything. And then you had the Uzbeks and the Tajiks and everybody else, and nobody liked each other.
And they have really nothing in common, right?
And they have very little other than their Muslim faith in many cases.
But even the Muslim faith is completely different.
It's completely different, depending on the group you're in.
Those are the things I don't think any of us can understand without being there and actually see it in reality, what it really means. Because if you will say to someone, oh, he's Shia, or I'm like, okay, he's Shia, and what, right? But now, once you see it, I'm like, oh, they really hate each other, and I really mean
they really
hate, like by hate. That's crazy.
You know, people think that the conflict in the Middle East has mostly to do with Israel, but it actually doesn't. It has mostly to do with the Shia and the Sunni vying for control of the Muslim brand. You know, who is the correct form of Islam? You go to Saudi Arabia, they'll tell you that Shia Islam is a heresy. You know, they'll say that they're all infidels and unbelievers. So
and that's fascinating.
It's a fascinating thing. So the real struggle in the Middle East has to do with, and I would say to a lesser degree, maybe in Afghanistan, but the tribalism in Afghanistan is very tough. It's a rough place to live. You know, it's a rough neighborhood. But I would say most people wanted to live peacefully.
Oh, yeah. But
again, for some reason, politics tends to attract sociopaths. So you get these power-hungry people that, you know, think they're doing God's work by, you know, executing you in the soccer stadium because you wore lipstick one day.
Yeah. You know, when you study, let's say, history of Europe, there were a war going on every single year. And all of them were, let's say, Christians, but they always found a reason why to kill each other, why to go. And I feel like it's the same out there, but they are just like hundreds of years still living in the past.
Correct.
But they do the same things that we did in the past. And to us right now, maybe because we kind of, I don't know, move more forward or something, we maybe can feel like, oh, those guys are like barbaric or something. But if you would go to Europe in like 1600s or something, what do you think you would see out there? You would see probably...
It's tribalism, just a different form of tribalism.
Exactly, right? You would see your great-grandfather raping some other like girl. I don't know.
I hope I wouldn't see that.
Yeah, I know. But you would see a lot of crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff,
people can't even imagine. Like, Europe was a peaceful place for the entire existence. We have very, like, at least until this moment, we had really a long period of time of weird, quiet times on the majority of the continent.
Yes. So you've had, what, 70 good years,
yeah,
right?
70. I mean, there was a war on the Yugoslavia and those things. They were dead thing, but there were nothing really dead major and devastating crazy. And right now, like, we see that the history is kind of repeating itself. And for me personally, I'm surprised by people responding when they see a war on their phone, and they are responding with like such emotions, because I'm like, this is a war. What would you expect?
Yes.
Where were you until now? You never talked to someone who's seen a war or someone who seen something bad. Like, our history is full of this.
Right.
And you kind of just like woke up out of your
slumber,
Western bubble, coma, realize that the world is pretty nasty place if you don't live on the Western part of the world. And I really mean that just North America and Europe. Right. Because everywhere else you go, like, there are bad things happening all the time. Right. You know? Yes. So
the world has been pretty much at war forever. And Europe had better part of 500 years of continuous war.
All the time. And we don't even know what was before that, right? Like, we
prehistory,
we only know what we know, and the rest, who knows what really happened? What was going on out there before the Christianity was a thing,
or before the Romans,
before
Pax Romana.
Yeah, like we don't really know. But some people reaction really like freaked me out, because I'm like, you guys are not living in reality. Like, war is hell, and no matter where it is, people are dying, and always civilians are dying, and always innocent people are dying, and the rocket is never gonna find 100% the target that is supposed to be.
And it's naive to believe we'll be at peace all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really, that's what gets you. I had friends in Germany, in the German army, and we would have discussions about what was happening in Yugoslavia back in the 90s. And there was a feeling among the Germans that, the Serbs and the Croats, they just need to kill each other for a while, then they'll get tired. Right?
What?
And I'm like, that's actually not how it works. Normally, you don't get tired of killing until you start losing people. Then you get tired. But
I mean, even if you would be waiting until they get tired, how long you're going to wait until they kill like 5 million of them? Or,
exactly.
It's going to be like in Rwanda, they're going to be killing, each other's with machetes. Like, this is the thing you want.
And it only makes healing worse. The longer a war goes, the longer it takes to heal.
Yeah.
I mean, look at, even now in Europe, you still have suspicions with the Germans, People are very suspicious of the Germans. Yeah. Even though they have you could almost say a pacifist ethos in Germany right now. Troubling
And they did a
sort of
lot of good
pacifist.
for world, you know, like Germans. You don't really hear Germans in the last, let's say, 60 years, like harming someone. You know, they harm people like crazy, but you see like what Soviet Union did in less than 70 years ago, you know, with their political prisoners, the camps that they were still running in 80s, and they were capturing a lot of people. And Germans didn't do any of that in, let's say, last 70 years, and they still have that stigma over them.
They still have the stigma.
Yeah. Meanwhile, some other people who did crazy, crazy things, even in my lifetime, and I'm not even 30, you know, like you see like bad things going on, and people still kind of, you know, but that's World War II. Like, it's something that is going to be here, I hope, forever as a reminder of what people are capable for.
Right.
Like, I went to a lot of concentration camps. I went to Mauthausen. I went to Auschwitz. I seen it all, man. It's crazy. Like, my city is 60 miles from Auschwitz. So
wow.
We went there with school.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that either until we went there with school. And I kind of realized, like, this is a hell. Like, this is like a definition of hell, and no one can imagine how it would look.
You know, the funny thing about the Germans, and it should be a caution to all of us, is in the 19th century, Germany was the most advanced, most progressive, if you will, most peaceful, intellectually flourishing, economically flourishing country in Europe in the 19th century. The Jews were thriving. Everyone was thriving in Germany. And then look what happened to the Germans. I mean, they were producing Goethe and Beethoven on the one hand. And then,
how such a country can do that, right?
Yeah. So any country really probably is capable of that sort of decline in a relatively swift order.
So you think like the first Gulf War was not mistake that you guys didn't keep going, but because you didn't keep the influence in the region over the Saddam Hussein
regime. We could have used, you know, we talk about hard power, that's like military power. We talk about in between power, like we talk about hard power and soft power. So you have a range, hard, soft. Soft would be like diplomatic messages, you know,
money,
things like money, right? And then in the middle, you would have like sanctions and things like that, sort of like a in between hard and soft power. So we could have used our diplomatic and economic power to make Iraq a better place where it wouldn't have been a problem. But our intel community, I believe, was obsessed with Iraq, partly because Saddam did not trust the United States or Britain specifically, but the world in general. And but had we rehabilitated him in some way and the country, it probably would have been better. Everything else...
Especially he could more control his own people, right?
Right. Yes, he was very... And little did we know when we bumped him off that there were hundreds and hundreds of little Saddams down there that were willing to run their, little things. And we created a fusion of the Islamic radicals, the fundamentalist radicals with the Baathists. And they normally wouldn't work together, but they learned to work together in order to fight against the Americans and the British and everybody else who was in Iraq, you know.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Before that, the Gulf War, there was a Iran-Iraq war.
Yeah, right? Big war.
But you guys were on the Saddam Hussein's side, right?
We were on
because he kind of looked like more than... He looked more as a Western type of leader than
he's more secular, obviously. Yes. But it's funny, on the one hand, sort of in a diplomatic domain, we were more on the side of Saddam. But in the sort of military side, there was some belief that there were moderate Iranians, and we sold the Iranians TOW missiles.
I saw that. Ronald Reagan was in the middle of that scandal, right?
Yes, and it was a very... it was the left hand not knowing what the right hand was doing.
Damn.
And it happens more than you would like. You know, there's a new movie on Netflix called Don't Look Up. Have you heard of it?
Don't Look Up, yeah.
With Leonardo DiCaprio. And it is a great movie. And my former colleagues, we love this movie. Not because it's like realistic in the big sense, but it shows how dysfunctional
things can be.
Governments and bureaucracies and the press can be.
Do you think that those things are mostly not intentional?
I think many things happen that are not intentional. Like, for example, right now, Russian rocket artillery and artillery is shooting houses and places in Ukraine. I'm not convinced. Everybody blames Putin, but I'm not convinced that those are actually real orders that they're getting. I think you have guys that are just randomly frustrated and shooting things. They look on a map, they plot the grid coordinate, they compute the mission, and then they fire the mission. Just because if you don't have eyes on your target, which right now the Russians do not have eyes on their target, you need eyes on your target, like a forward observer or a UAV or an aircraft, that you can say, hey, you know, there's a tank battalion in the open, you know, send them the thing, and then you attack the tank battalion. But what it's really showing is the Russian forces are really unprofessional. They do not, everyone assumed they had improved their training, improved their capabilities, and in a certain way they've improved their capabilities, but without the training, without the discipline, without the, you know, you need to have a professional military ethic in your military forces. Now, what they're doing now is exactly how they beat the Germans in World War II. They just
massive.
Just use a lot of artillery and destroy everything.
I want to get into all of that, and especially I want to get into this topic through current experiences of U.S. Army in Afghanistan. Because when we talk about like level of incompetence or whatever, like in last couple of months, we've seen something very similar on the U.S. side as well that literally shocked the world, the way how this operation was conducted. Like no one.
You mean the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Yes. No one.
Yeah, that was a total failure.
Yeah, so I want to get into that as well, but let me first go back a little bit to that Iraq. So when you guys pushed Saddam back and then they were not able to control him and the sanctions were like killing the country, you decided that you're gonna attack him because President Bush said that Iraq is having or massing weapons of mass destruction.
Correct.
People always say that this was a lie. Is there, and you've been there.
Right. So I was on a team that looked for weapons of mass destruction as part of the Iraq survey group. It's a brigade size organization under General Dayton. And we found what I would say are, I like to use an analogy. We found a lot of drug paraphernalia, but we didn't find the drugs.
Yeah, so we found the substances.
We found the things that you would use if you had the drugs, but we didn't find the drugs. So we found things that looked like they could be used for chemical weapons development, but we didn't find actual chemicals. Although, I'll put a footnote there, we did find lots of chemical weapons, older ones, that they said they had destroyed, that were not destroyed. But they were unusable. But they were there.
Unusable by what mean?
Unusable because they had gotten old.
Okay.
Once, chemical weapons are a very high maintenance thing. They require certain conditions to be kept stable. If they go bad, they lose their toxicity and so forth. Then we also found things like huge, many, hundreds and hundreds of acres of bunkers filled with pesticide. And you look around.
There's no grass.
And there's no greenery anywhere. And, pesticide is just a stone's throw away from...
You said hundreds of acres of bunkers. Like,
bunkers.
What?
Literally hundreds of acres, thousands of acres of bunkers everywhere. There were more bunkers in Iraq than I've ever seen. Like underground, earth-covered bunkers.
So it looks like just regular ground, nothing, just entrance, maybe something you go in.
Well, you drive through the fence, and then you see, as far as the eye can see, you see bunkers.
Wow.
Yeah, lots of bunkers. And in those things, we found a lot of prohibited weapons, so they weren't allowed to have certain types of weapons. We found other things such as copies, Iranian mines that were copies of American mines.
Really?
Yes, we found American mines that were Iranian mines that were copies of American mines. We found, we also learned later that the Iranians were manufacturing a lot of the IEDs and the explosively formed EFPs, explosively formed penetrators that were being used against us, that they were actually being manufactured in Iran. And there was a lot of, in the intel community, I will say there was lots of consternation about the fact that we weren't sharing that. When you capture something on a battlefield, it's not classified. But we had general officers telling us that we had to classify the fact that we were finding these things. But in reality, if you find something on a battlefield, you don't classify it. And why is that? Because once you capture it, the enemy knows you have it. And that's why you have classified. You're using classified to protect information you have that you don't want the enemy to know. You're not trying to hide it, save that information from the American people. You're trying to, classify it to protect it.
But isn't it always like a definition? Oh, we want to make sure enemies doesn't know it. Well, but maybe the citizens want to know it too.
There you go.
But then the enemies would know because the citizens would just go and talk, right?
Right.
It's kind of
yeah. The people, I'm sure. I think the attitude would have changed sooner had people known. And it might have provided more will. Clausewitz says you need three things to run a war. You need the people, the government, and a capable military. If you lose the people, you can't conduct the war.
Vietnam, pretty much.
Right. If you don't have a good military, you can't conduct the war. Right. So you got to have the people. And
do you think that this whole situation was just poorly explained by, let's say, U.S. media, what you guys actually found? Because it looks like that you just went there and there was nothing, and then that you killed 500,000 people just for no reason.
Right.
Like, do you think that a part of that is like poor explanation of what really took place out there?
My observation is that there's a lot of bias in reporting nowadays, and things are very polarized. So, for example, before the war under Bush, the New York Times and others amplified the issue of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. After the war, they said things like Bush lied, but they were the ones actually
doing that,
like New York Times, pushing these ideas, and they were using their own sources inside of DOD and elsewhere. And then, of course, you had Colin Powell go to the UN and play the...
What was that? He had like a little...
He had some...
bottle with like sample of anthrax, or what was that?
I don't know. Who knows? But he used it to persuade the world that Iraq was in violation of UN sanctions. And they were. But the question was did that require a war? Did that require a war?
What do you think about that? It's 2020, as 2022, as you said. Like, what do you think about it right now? Do you think it was a mistake or not?
I think it was a mistake in the sense that, and again, everything's speculation, right? When you look back, it's easy to cherry pick and so forth. So I think that it was a mistake, that we should have just rehabilitated Saddam Hussein and created stability. We have to accept the fact that there are thugs and megalomaniacs out there in the world, and they exist. You can't get too close to them, maybe, but you have to be realistic and acknowledge that they exist. And until those people change their government, that's what they got. And you can do things to mitigate. You can try to influence, use soft power to try to influence. Like right now, Saudi Arabia, you can, if you're a woman, you can learn to drive now. It took a lot of influence over the years to get to that point. In Kuwait, women can vote. That's a big thing. So war should always be the last resort, and only if normally we say that only when your vital interests are at stake should you be at war. That means your peripheral interests should not be the thing that drives you to war.
As you said, like, I have Jocko Willink book right here, and it's here for a purpose, because it kind of like sums a lot of the difference in reality based on the year. you went there in 2003, and when I saw the videos, especially people in Baghdad, they were really happy that you guys are there.
Oh, I had Iraqis tell me that we should have done it 30 years ago.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But when Joko was, I listen his podcast and I read his books, he's saying that because you guys got out there without the control.
Right.
When he came there a year later.
Right.
The insurgency was just insane.
Correct. That was that would be a strategic mistake that the United States made. You can't just leave the conquered nation to fend for itself. It opens the door for organized crime, for mafia-like activities, bad guys,
especially out there,
Al-Qaeda,
yeah,
or whatever. To be, I have a friend who lived in a section of Baghdad called Al-Jihad. It was the Al-Jihad neighborhood. Funny name, huh?
He's explaining that in that book. I remember that. Al-Jihad.
Al-Jihad. Yeah. In the Al-Jihad neighborhood, ran pretty much along the route that led from the airport to the city center of Baghdad. And what would happen would be the bad guys would shoot at the American convoys going between the airport and the city center, or blow up a bomb or something, and then they would run to escape through this neighborhood of Al-Jihad. Well, the locals didn't like that. They were happy that, in a way, that that was an upscale neighborhood. They were kind of in a way glad that Saddam Hussein was gone. So what they did is they blocked up the roads, some of the roads and some of the alleyways in their neighborhood, so that they would prevent the bad guys from running through their neighborhood. So then one day a bad guy showed up at the little community center there by the market and said, if you don't take these down, we're going to start blowing up car bombs in your neighborhood here. And then so the people took them down. They had no choice. So when you take a country, you have to be able to protect the people. If you can't protect the people, you should not be
And do you think that this was one of the failures on the beginning of this operation?
Say this again. So
do you think that this was one of the failures on the beginning?
Yes, it was one of the failures, because our working assumption was that once we got rid of Saddam Hussein, that the police would still be there, the bureaucrats, the civil service. Honestly, Iraq had, by Middle Eastern standards, a pretty good civil service, but they were all Baathists. So the problem then you have is we had de-Baathification. So no Baathist could get his old job back. Instead of realizing that a lot of people were just Baathists so they could get a job, we decided that...
Well, that was the ruling party, right? Of the
ruling party
of that. Yeah. So yeah, I understand that. Like if you just get rid of the party and everybody belongs to them, like who they are gonna be serving to, right?
Yeah,
that is weird.
So de-Baathification was a mistake in the sense that not all Baathists were necessarily bad people.
Well, yeah, like not everybody who was in the Communist Party was a bad person.
Right.
It's just you are forced literally if. Otherwise, you cannot live.
If you wanted a good job, you would become a communist, right?
Yeah. I mean, so once in a while I go on YouTube and I'm just browsing some interesting, informations or whatever, right? And I saw, I don't know his name, but he was a Navy officer, and he was captured by the Viet Cong in Vietnam. And he was repeating what they were telling him what to say to Americans. Was one of the few officers to be captured. But in his eyes, he blinked in a Morse code of war torture.
Yes.
Like, how crazy is that? That you are... Man, I have a goose skin.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I mean...
Right?
Such bravery.
You are gonna do whatever they say with the gun on your head.
Right.
But...
You're gonna signal in other ways.
There are also the other actions you're gonna take in order to separate yourself from that ideology or something. And that's so unique and brave. So... Every time I talk to Vietnam veterans right here, because there's so many of them, very often they tell me that the longer they were in Vietnam, more Viet Cong they were, because they gave them every opportunity to hate them, because they've been told, you have to go there and attack those guys. But maybe there was a intelligence misinformation or something, and they realize, damn, we are gonna probably kill some guys, who had nothing to do with the war, but the remaining guys from there will become a Viet Cong. So I kind of feel that in Iraq, it was very similar, as you maybe said before, that sometimes the own people will join against its own
Right. That actually happened in Afghanistan. similar thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. We make fun of it now, but we see these pictures of the Taliban guys coming into Kabul after the war, and you can tell by the way they're holding their weapons and different things they're doing. You can tell they were trained by coalition, by NATO forces. So you can tell that they were once on our side, on the Afghan army side, and they ran away and they joined the Taliban because they probably for their own safety in many cases, because the way the Taliban operated is if they found out you were working for the Afghan government, they would just kill your family or threaten to kill your family unless you.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you think that longer you guys were staying in Iraq was making the same result, making like the local population hate you more, even when on the beginning they like you?
Right. It's better to leave a functioning government, better to have a very minimal footprint, but you have to be able to protect the people. If you can't protect the people, it's no good. Ironically, because of what happened with ISIS or Daesh or ISIL, depending on what you want to call them, how quickly the Iraqis wanted us back after when that all began. And I remember reading an interview from one of the Iraqi soldiers from Mosul who said, basically, the first people to run were the leaders. Because
what are leaders?
The leaders, right? So the leaders were the first ones to run. So the problem was the Iraqi government was assigning people positions of command based on sort of a patronage. You know, you're my friend, I'm going to make you the brigade commander of something.
That's what's going on right now, but at a different level. You will say, oh, we need a Supreme Court judge. It's not the best judge, but based on color.
Right.
Like what?
Yeah.
It's like no matter what you do, you have to pick up people who are good in doing things, not based on how they look or what's their sex, gender, or if it's your friend or not. Like if you want to run something, it has to be about capabilities.
That's right.
And nothing else.
Capabilities and honesty. And I mean, there's so many things. The United States used to have so many, you know, it was really almost an extension of Northwest Europe, the United States for a long time. And now it's changing. It's very... I'm not sure it's going to be for the better, but it's changing.
Yeah, I can tell, man. It's crazy, and you know what is really fascinating? People in Europe, they don't really realize how much the United States is changing, and they still count on it the way how they would count on it like 40 years ago.
Right.
But they're counting on the different country now.
Right. They are counting on a different country. Exactly.
They're not realizing that. I'm trying to like always show them or tell them, or I'm like, hey, when you talk to the youngsters, it's not the same if you will sit down with someone who is 60 years old.
Right.
And the worst question that Europeans tend to ask me is, what Americans think about that? I'm like, how do I know?
Yeah, how do you answer that question?
You can't. You cannot even define who is American nowadays.
Right.
You can't, because most people don't even know when Constitution
Many Americans
was signed.
hate their country now.
Oh yeah.
They think it's we're so evil.
I mean, so the Iraq was definitely a mistake in the way how it was explained, informed, conducted.
Right. But hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But obviously...
Actually, you can say now, the way it all unfolded, that Iraq is a success story now.
Oh yeah, compared to Afghanistan.
You can say Iraq is a success story. They have mechanisms, they have constitutional mechanisms to deal with their differences between the Shia and the Kurds and the Sunni guys. And so
they're able to live somehow together. You don't really...
They didn't just get there. Yeah. You know, they had to learn some hard lessons. But
well, 20 years is 20 years, you know.
You could even say, and it remains to be seen in Afghanistan, because it's pretty obvious this Taliban is a lot different than the Taliban of 20 years ago. Right.
Yeah, so. It's completely, especially now they are the best equipped army on the planet, you know, so.
Yeah. Very well equipped army
very
now.
Well equipped with the best night vision goggles and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you joined intelligence service. To me, this is fascinating world, like, because I feel that we as the citizens, we know very, very little about everything.
Yes, that's true. And we're very subject to things that, if you watch a Hollywood movie, 90% of the time, the army guy is a jerk. The army general or colonel, he's an asshole. You know, he's not a good guy. You know, and that's a stereotype that is actually probably very different in reality. You would be surprised how democratic and how sensitive American officers and non-commissioned officers are compared to even a European army. So, for example, my wife, who is from the former Soviet Union, she's amazed that a private will come, you know, when I'm in uniform as a colonel, that a private will come up and start talking to me, because that would not happen in maybe even most other countries,
That's
even
true.
European countries. They have a stronger boundary. So I've had soldiers say, "Sir, why do you want to do that? Wouldn't it be better to do this?"
Damn.
And if you have time to talk about it, you talk about it. And maybe they have a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. So you listen. That's a very different attitude. I'm sure that does not exist in the Soviet and the Russian army. Yeah. If you do that, you're finished.
And
They
your
eat
family
separately. You know, in the American army, we eat together. You know, we don't have separate class divides, if you will, between officers, non-commissioned officers, and enlisted people.
too. So when you watch what's going on in the world, I'm sure you have some sense, some bullshit detector, you know, because when you listen, let's say, in media, they're telling you what's going on in the world.
Right.
There's something that, because of your previous life experience, there's something that is to be clicking, right? And be
Correct.
like, that's what they're saying, US citizens. I know that the reality can be a little different.
Right.
Is it true that the reality is most likely different than they are presenting us in the news?
Say the last part again.
Is it possible that the news are not telling us the full
absolutely.
story?
I mean, our journalism is dead in the United States right now. It's out there, but it's you have to sift well. It's all about the narrative now. People build a narrative. Like, for example, a couple days ago, the New York Times, this is unrelated basically to your line of questions, but as a point of example, the Hunter Biden laptop.
Oh, yeah.
The New York Times finally admitted it was real 2 days ago. So
2 days ago.
meanwhile, NPR, Washington Post, you name it, President Biden during his debates, they were all saying it was Russian disinformation.
Oh, yeah, like always.
Right? So, and yet other journalists back then were saying, well, we're not too sure, you know, it looks real, it smells real.
Man, this topic's been here for the last 2 years.
Right.
And they admitted 2 days ago.
They just 2 days ago, right. So, yes, so if they don't like you, if they don't like your policy, like, for example, in President Bush's end of his first term, they were comparing organizations like MoveOn.org were comparing George W. Bush to Adolf Hitler. There could be nothing more historically stupid and ignorant to say than to say President Bush was like Adolf Hitler. And yet, MoveOn was running TV ads. I know Democratic friends that listen to Democratic news sources who thought that
it's called Move On.
MoveOn.org. Yeah,
well,
MoveOn.
Those are the things I don't really follow.
Yeah,
so
it's a crazy organization. So now you have all of these influencers out there that are mostly, I'd say, 80% progressive, left of center, to the extreme, Occupy Democrats, way to the extreme, Antifa further to the extreme, you know, that are out there trying to influence journalism, and they try to shape the journalism. They try to shape the narrative. And frankly, you know, a lot of the investigative, analytical work that needs to be done in journalism, oftentimes they just take the word from some leftist organization to tell you what it is, but it might not be that at all.
Well, this thing is very interesting. You know why? No one in Europe knows about it. When I mention it during the election time, and I said, like, hey, this laptop story cannot be just ignored. No one in Europe even knew about it. Nowadays, they still don't know such a thing is. They don't know what's Hunter Biden. They don't even know who Hunter Biden is. They don't know the connection to Ukraine, to Russia, to Moscow
China.
mayor wife. They don't know any of that.
Oh, really?
Right now, people are, even if they are listening right now, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
But here, those are the topics for the last 2 years, but only if you are kind of searching for it. Otherwise, it's not admitted.
Right, right.
So what do you think is going to happen, let's say, in this story?
I don't know. Most people just want to live their lives, do their job, raise their kids, and, eat at
Just
a nice
don't be
restaurant.
bugging me, right?
Yeah. People have a certain tolerance and overload. And you have these nurturing organizations that, like George Soros runs some organizations that will basically bring up and nurture
Something.
left of center politicians. Our whole legal industry has been influenced almost beyond repair, where you have these prosecutors that refuse to prosecute violent crimes, or prosecutors that...
Oh yeah, man. I lived in LA. I can tell you that thing is like so real as you say it.
Yeah.
They don't prosecute anything.
Right. They don't prosecute. And that's because they think they're doing some social justice good work by not prosecuting. But actually, if you want to, the conditions you need to have a safe society means you're going to, you're going to protect the people. It's sort of like anywhere. You protect the people.
Yeah, protect the people. So you really think that the media are having a bias?
Oh, more than a bias.
More than.
I think they're probably, half of them are probably enlisted. Mm-hmm. I have friends who send me things that are from news sources like the American Independent or the Daily Boulder or Act Blue. They think they're real news sites, but they're just political arms of political organizations that are influencers. So there's a lot of influencing going on. We're the most propagandized I've ever seen us in my lifetime.
I want to touch a little bit the current times we're living at, because you experienced something during your lifetime in the United States. You mentioned that the United States are changing like never before. Did you ever meet any U.S. president in person?
I did. I met George H.W. Bush and Barbara Bush. Okay. But he was out of office by that time. Okay. But I met him up in Philadelphia.
Interesting.
Got a hug. He's very tall.
He was really tall, yeah. I mean, based on your experience, especially in your military career, who was the best president under you have served? Because you retired in 2015, so you lived through 4 of them, right? Bush, Clinton,
I'd say Ronald Reagan.
Oh, you also, yeah.
I love Ronald Reagan. But Trump, I wasn't really in the Army when Trump was president, but he did rebuild the military. His rhetoric may not have always been the best, and his choice of words may not have always been the best, but he did do a lot to rebuild the military and secure the southern border. So he may have been good. The problem is right now in the military, it was like the last bastion of traditional American values, and now it's gone like a social experiment.
Have you seen the army recruitment video?
I saw the one of the woman who had 2 mothers or something like that.
The animated one. What do you think about that?
I just shake my head.
What do you think when the Chinese or the Russians are watching this? What do you think that they are thinking? Everybody in the comment section
think we're idiots.
Yeah, everybody in the comment section said that the American video made them to join the Russian army.
Right. Yeah, they think we're idiots. I saw a really funny Russian political cartoon before one of their elections. Not a cartoon, but a political advertisement, and it was a family with a little girl, and the girl brings home like a lesbian LGBT flag home from school that she colored. This is a Russian political advertisement for, I think it was for Putin. And but I saw it on Russian TV. So she brings home a lesbian flag that she colored in school, and he's like, oh, like this, and then the husband and wife start talking, and he's like supposedly living in like St. Petersburg or something, and he opens the window and you hear machine gun fire, and he goes, yeah, NATO's gotten a lot closer, And so it was a lot of social hot button issues for Russians, and it was a very funny, actually.
So they were making like fun of
they were making fun of it all, yes. Because what do you want in the West? We know of a priest when my wife was becoming the godmother of a little boy named Pasha, and the Orthodox priest said, "Everybody face to the West. That's hell. That's evil." Meaning us, the Western Europeans, the Americans. Look to the East. That's paradise. You know, the East is where, you know, paradise, you know. So there's a lot of
propaganda. But why is it there? Like, what's the outcome? What kind of good does it make if you are softening the military? Like, the Chinese are watching that. Like, they are not gonna be like, oh, we still believe that U.S. Army is where it used to be 50 years ago when it comes to like patriotism, morality, and, you know, leadership and all that. And then they see this. Like, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
They're like killing. It's like a shooting your own knee.
Yes. Are you referring to the Russians or
no?
To
I'm
us?
referring to that like the American recruitment video. With
Why would they do that?
Why would they
want to? It's virtue signaling, right? That's the word for it now, right?
But army is not about virtue signaling. Army is about defending strength and all that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Why not show strength? We used to say, you know, that we used to have advertisements of our army, and it would show strength jumping out of a. You know, you ain't lived until you jumped out of an airplane, right? So they show that, and they show, you know, wearing in the jungle, you know, coming up out of the water. Yeah,
as a man, when I see something like this you just described, that is where I get the testosterone out of it. I feel the power. That's what makes me to join. That's what makes me as a man. That is making me the emotions needed to do such a thing.
The positive masculinity.
Exactly.
I want to protect my loved ones.
I know. Yeah, exactly. That's the same thing. But now from that thing, I have the opposite one.
Right.
I'm like, I don't want to be
Most people would, I would say. Personally, I think I'm pretty well inoculated against it because I'm just so used to seeing so much BS that I don't even, I just you know, brush it off. But the truth is that we're in a crisis of masculinity, a crisis of science and gender. You could say gender confusion. You know, I think most Americans don't believe that if you're a man, you can be a woman or have a baby. But there are people in power that believe those things. And then you have the big corporate entities like the NCAA or Citibank or somebody. They push those things as well in order to show that they're progressive. Yeah. And the funny thing is,
we are good people.
Like, they're good. Right. They're good.
But why is it necessary?
It's right. Why is it necessary? Because I think 80% of Americans do not agree with any of that stuff.
See, like, shouldn't you be doing? I mean, look at the Florida, right? We have Governor Ron DeSantis, right? He always say things that kind of make sense. Right. You listen it, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. I'm not really expert in that field. Makes sense. When it comes to education of kids, don't put there any politics, don't put there any ideology.
Right. Don't indoctrinate.
Teach them American, like, you know, history, teach them English, teach them math, teach them basic things. But don't put there any indoctrination or something. So I'm like, yeah, why not? And there are people who protest against that. Right. I understand why. You know?
Why is a tough question, right? Why do people suffer? Why does God let bad things happen? I mean, true. It's like it's our cultural moment, right? It's we're in a flux of influences right now. We're in a whirlpool, so to speak, you know, and we have to sort out right from wrong.
So you said that Ronald Reagan is a president you kind of experience, and you think he was really a guy that should be on position of the president.
And I'd say George W. Bush was a pretty good commander. I was upset that he was being compared to Hitler, for example, or I was upset with the whole Bush lied, people died mantra that you would hear because I was over in Iraq where they had plenty of things that they weren't supposed to have. And we didn't find their chemical weapons, but you know, Syria magically developed a chemical weapons program right after that. So we know that a lot of things, it took 6 months to build up for that invasion, right? And we know a lot of things went to Syria, to his Ba'athist buddy over there in Damascus. And then suddenly they had a chemical weapons program, which the Israelis have since bombed.
Man, it looks like everybody's bombing everyone. Like, can we just
now? Although they did use it in like places like Aleppo and other places.
I mean, it's so barbaric. Like, you see it in the First World War. Like, you see how the soldiers are blind, lined up, holding each other because they are after a chemical attack or something. It's such a barbaric way how you can attack another human being because you are literally like trying to like just kill their skin,
disfigure
eyes, like just really. It's not about like even shooting them, you know. It's like really about suffering incredible pain.
Absolutely.
And it's nuts. I mean, war by just all meanings is just nuts.
Right.
That's why I want to ask you next question. As someone who also worked in intelligence service for such a long time, maybe you will have more, maybe we'll have a little different look at all these things. 2016 shocked the world. What would you think would be different if Hillary would won?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Again, that's all speculation. But
there were a huge conflict happening in Korea, right?
Pardon?
I mean, there was a problem in Korea.
Oh, there was a big problem in Korea. Yeah, we may have, I mean, theoretically, we could have gone to war with Korea. You know, honestly, Trump doesn't get much credit, but he did de-escalate the Korean Peninsula quite a bit by his engagement with Kim in Korea. So how would it have been? I think things would have progressed along a downward spiral. I think it would have been the same as what we have under Biden, maybe not as blatant. Right now, it's very blatant under Biden. The craziness, the crazy policies are pretty amazing to watch under this administration. 2 million people crossing the southern border in a year. I mean, it's like the bad news is there's 250 million more people in Latin America that also want to come here. Mm-hmm. So if we let that happen, then we'll be swamped and overwhelmed, and that will be that. So how would it have been different if Hillary were president? Well, I don't know. I think it would have been pretty much what you're seeing now, only maybe a little less pronounced.
Maybe sooner?
Sooner, yes. And also, you wouldn't have had this extreme, Trump, for all his strengths and weaknesses, did galvanize the left like no one I've ever seen. So the polarization increased, but in a way, maybe it's good that the polarization increased because many people
woke up.
Woke up, right? In a way, you could say we're sleepwalking along our path, right? And a guy like Trump, he forces people to think about where we're going culturally, where we're going militarily, where, globalization versus, an America first type policy. Trump, had his problems, but he definitely said what he saw, whether you liked it or not, and people have been stirred to action. So in a way, I'm happy right now because I would say there are more people snapping out of it than I've seen in a long time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right? Because
every time when a new president comes to the office, I have that kind of fantasy, and I'm trying to tell myself what would be if I would sit in the Oval Office and
right.
I would tell them on the first day, tell me everything. I'm like, just tell me everything that you are allowed to tell me. Tell me who killed Kennedy. Tell me this. Tell me that. Are there aliens? Tell me everything. I want to know literally everything.
Yeah.
Do you think that there are things that they have to keep from a president, especially someone like Trump who likes to talk?
I think Trump was the most undermined president in years. Take the Vindman thing, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. Mm-hmm. He really just had a case of role confusion. Mm-hmm. He was a policy analyst. He was a support. He was part of the NSC staff, right? Mm-hmm. His job is to advise the president. But the president, whoever he is, Clinton, Trump, whatever, the president is the decider. Mm-hmm. So Vindman had a case of role confusion. He thought he should be the decider and not Trump. That's why he leaked to that the HIPSI, the House Intelligence Subcommittee or whatever they're called, and also to the press. And so Vindman leaked all that. Trump had more of his phone calls leaked to the media. That's really uncalled for and unheard of. Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
I would, pardon?
Oh, really? That's not something that
doesn't happen normally, right? Normally Normally our civil service has been historically pretty good about remaining apolitical. Mm. That is not true now. Our bureaucracy is now politicized. And
how is it possible that the people that are supposed to work as a team are going after each other? That's really like something I haven't seen.
It is unbelievable, yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, very crazy. Crazy is a good word. And
so are there things that, obviously, if they decide not to tell him, that's a personal decision. But are there things that they are obligated to keep from a sitting president to know?
No. The president can ask for whatever he wants,
Really?
and they're supposed to provide it. Right.
That is
We have
so
compartments in the intelligence community. We have things that, for example, if I'm working in NSA and you're working in CIA, there are things that I'm not allowed to tell you because you don't have a need to know.
cool. Got it.
You don't need to know the technical features or of things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And just like I don't need to know whatever human operations you're running around the world because
Man, I swear.
well, so so the president, on the other hand, he's the guy at the top. So if he asks for something, he's supposed to be told the truth. And I'm not sure that happened with him. I think they tried to. I think people around him, many of them felt like they were doing a patriotic duty by not telling him everything, not doing what he said, and that's crazy. He was elected, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're elected, you know, he's the guy that gets held responsible.
So this just blew my mind because this is the position that can tell you the ultimate answer about everything that is going on in the world. It seems like it, and that's crazy because especially from someone like him, I'm talking about Trump, he was in that high level of society, but on the other side,
he was still on the, even when he was on the inside, he was on the outside.
He was on the outside. So now you go in there and then now you have really access into what's going on. Man, I don't think I would be able to just keep silent. Especially when they are threatening you with something for you just to come out and just say, hey, I know this, and no one ever talk about those kind of things publicly. Man, that could really crush the world. Honestly, when the whole thing about the elections and about all those things on the end, it was very dramatic. People didn't know people have no idea what's gonna happen.
Right.
I really thought that he's gonna go crazy and he's gonna leak something. I was like, damn, if he's gonna leak something.
You're referring to Trump?
Yes.
Oh, well, I think he bit his tongue a lot. I mean, for example, take the virus, right? The pandemic. There's a lot of people that believe the virus emanated from the laboratory in Wuhan. Mm-hmm. If that's true, he said it, kind of, but he didn't give any classified details about it. He just, because there are competing assessments, right? So you get a hunch, sometimes you run with it. And a lot of people, I had friends that were listening to Russian, because I know a lot of Russians and Ukrainians, and they like to listen to crazy conspiracy. They seem to gravitate toward conspiracy theories, right? So they believed Trump was going to declare martial law and things like that. And I said, that'll never happen. That'll never happen.
And they should take your word for granted because obviously you've been in such an environment for quite a time.
Plus, in America, the government is so fragmented. You have states, locals, you have federal, then you have competing bureaucracies at the federal level, right? So there's no way to, you really need to have really honest people in all levels of government if you really want it to work right. And dispassionate people that don't care that you're a Democrat or don't care that you're a Republican and will.
That's very hard to find
nowadays.
It's
very hard to find, polarized. Right? Because there were people that would undermine Trump's policies when he was president. Yeah. Look, Biden doesn't have any of this problem. That's because most people in D.C. think like him, But I have an FBI buddy who lives somewhere, and he has informed me that the field offices can't stand what's going on in the FBI.
I don't think anyone can stand what's going on anywhere.
Right. Can't stand it, and yet the people around D.C., they are a different breed, and
different world.
We
don't even have to go to FBI. Just talk to a random police officer on the street in the big cities. They're gonna tell you they've never seen such an incompetent leadership in their entire life, and they feel miserable. And I'm feeling bad for those guys because they're
absolutely
just regular guys having a family at home, but their job is become all of a sudden so dangerous.
Yes,
because no one has their back.
I mean, sitting in your car getting shot in the head.
Man, that thing is so common. Right. I don't even understand how this cannot even make a headlines of a news for, let's say, months straight.
Right.
They mention it and they're like, next news.
Right. They try to make it seem normal. That's, you normalize crazy things. When you're a progressive or a leftist, you're a revolutionary of whatever flavor, you try to normalize things, you know,
Normalization.
that enhance your ability to conduct a revolution, right? So,
That is
and then because eventually the people will not tolerate it anymore, and then you create social chaos. Social chaos is the condition that gives you the opportunity to
create new things.
to create your revolution.
The cycle just keeps repeating itself, and every time the last generation kind of like dies or it's too old, so
Right.
no one listens to them, it just repeats, and people are just following it blindly, and there's no way you can explain it.
Right.
For the end, I would like to get into the current situation that's going on in Ukraine. There was during the Bush administration, there was the attack, I believe, in Georgia. During the Obama
They invaded Georgia while
administration.
Bush was president.
Yeah, during
South Ossetia and Abkhazia.
Exactly.
Right.
During the Obama administration, they invited the Crimea area.
Right.
During the Biden, they invited this. During Trump, they didn't invite anything.
Right.
I want to know your honest opinion, because I'm sure there's so many people who hate Trump or whatever. Like, I don't care about that.
I do have an opinion.
we care about facts. You
Right.
know, this happened, and during this period of time,
Right.
nothing happened.
Right.
Why was that?
The reason was uncertainty. So the beauty of strategic messaging is that you can create uncertainty in the mind of your adversary. So with Trump, no one knew what he would do. So with Trump, it was always a case of massive uncertainty of what he would do. And everybody saw what he did with ISIS. Everybody thought he would handle ISIS the same way Obama handled ISIS, which was essentially managing to the best they could, incrementally, you know, pushing ISIS back. He had a very, micromanagerial style with his combatant commander and with the battlefield commanders, where they had to get permission to kill somebody, for example, a high-level guy, or in a certain town, to conduct a raid in a certain town. They had to get permission all the time. What Trump did was just Trump gave it to the combatant commander and gave the brigade commanders, you get to decide if you have this target of opportunity, if you have this option, if you see the bad guys up there on the hill, you're allowed to shoot them without calling back to Washington, D.C. So he untied the hands of the warfighters. And within, I forget, didn't take very long. ISIS, it's not hard to win a war.
I remember before 2016, ISIS was something that people were so afraid of. Like, there were so many videos going on the internet when they are like beheading people, when they are killing people. And then all of a sudden, that dude from reality show got into TV and said, hey, generals, like, just bomb the shit out of them or whatever.
Right.
And I don't know.
Well, he says that, but that's not what they did.
I know.
Yeah. But that's the idea, is to destroy them.
But all of a sudden, this stuff become a thing in the mainstream media for some reason. For years you could hear from 2014 to 2016. I pretty much seen every day just ISIS news, like what's going on, how they're taking over they take over this.
The caliphate is growing, blah, blah, blah.
But all of a sudden, just silent, and we had to deal if Donald Trump banged some porn star. That was the main headline. By the way, what you just mentioned, the leadership, that's exactly the book, like distance, I don't even know how to disconnect command or something like this, because you are not in the battlefield and you cannot know everything. The guys out there have to know what is there in their capabilities, what they can figure out in the situation.
They have to be able to visualize the battlefield. And the battlefield is more than just a battlefield. The battlefield is the environment. Mm-hmm. It's the people. Mm-hmm. It's the towns. It's the culture of that town versus the culture of this town. Mm-hmm. You're trying to orchestrate everything in such a way that you can win over the people that are on the fence and kill the bad guys. Actually, that's the big difference. We under Obama, with ISIS, we thought we could just kill the leaders, but that's not how that culture works. If you kill that leader, then there's another leader. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, unfortunately, the way you defeat an enemy is you destroy them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what Trump did. And you allow those combatant commanders to basically communicate to the people in their battle space in their operating environment, what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. And people side with winners. So if they think you're going to win, in Iraq, we're just another tribe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
We're just another tribe.
Winning tribe.
So if they want to be with a winner, if they think you're going to win, they're going to come your way. If they think you're just going to put them at risk, they are going to sit on the fence. If you do something bad to them, then you push them over to the dark side. So going back to Ukraine is bad because of the strategic messaging. Every time President Biden says, we won't do this and we won't do that and we won't do this and we, whatever, you pick your example. All that does is green light more escalation on the part of Russia, on the part of Vladimir Putin. We've eliminated uncertainty for him. He knows that he can do almost anything without any risk of any NATO forces jumping in and risking a wider war. And he knows by saying, I put my nuclear forces on high alert, he knows that the nations in NATO will all become paralyzed with fear. He knows that they will, stand off. He knows that they will. There are ways around that, that what we need are people that can think out of the box. Like Trump, obviously, thunk out of the box, right? He was able to, with the peace agreements between Israel and those other Arab countries.
That was also very exceptional, right?
Very exceptional. So he was able to get people to think outside the box, and that's what you need here. You have to think of ways. For example, I could suggest an idea. So in 1994, we signed the Budapest Agreement. The Great Britain, the United States, and Russia guaranteed the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine if they gave up their 300 nuclear weapons. So why not use a UN brokered agreement, just the UK, just the United States, not the rest of NATO, under a UN flag, provide support and protection for the people of Ukraine? Because we signed the document guaranteeing the security of Ukraine, and now we're not doing anything. So if you really wanted...
just paper.
It was just a piece of paper to the people who signed it. And frankly, why didn't we listen? I'm not a pro-Russian guy by any stretch of the imagination, but James Baker and Clinton and those guys, they guaranteed Russia that NATO would not expand to the east. Now, if I'm Estonia, I want to be in NATO. I feel safer in NATO. If Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, you name it, Czech Republic, you feel better in NATO because of your history. But on the other hand, there comes a point where...
How much is too much, right?
How much, right. What is the point where you create too much consternation? Now, on the other hand, Putin says things like, we're being surrounded by NATO, which is a lie in the sense that, NATO has countries around them. And they'll say something like, there are American forces in Estonia. Well, normally 100 guys, right? 100 guys in Estonia, an infantry company that rotates in and out, So in a way, it's true, but it's a lie. Yeah. So he says it to the Russian people to galvanize them, to get support. But 100 infantry guys, light infantry guys from the United States are not a threat to the Russian Federation,
There's it's crazy that each side is just using part of the truth.
Yes.
And fabricating the entire story. And what's crazy? Every time I talk to guys in my age who served in the US military of any branch, and they are telling me they were in Europe, they're like, bro, we are on the base, and once we are on the base, we are off to bars, to party with local chicks. I'm like, bro, you are there. You are there, but you are not even there. So the fact that you'll say, NATO is out there, I'm like, hey, half of those guys are just sleeping with some local chicks out there, and then they go back to work. They don't really care about anything. And as you said, it's just very a little fraction of that. But I understand that both parties are able to fabricate the entire story because of this.
And that's the strength of good propaganda, right? Good propaganda has enough truth in it that it makes it credible. unless you dig into it.
See, we have so many examples because of the previous administration. There was so many lies fabricated because of that. One of those things is just like that Donald Trump was put into office by Russians, which is proven.
Oh, right. That was a huge lie.
Yeah, that was a huge lie. And it's right now proven because some of the people from Hillary Clinton's team are already in prison or FBI is investigating because they made it up. Do you think something like that is just going to happen to those people, that this thing is just going to stop and we are going to finally see some form of truth finally?
Well, one would hope, but I don't have high hopes because right now it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of, like DOJ is protecting people inside of DOJ who were pushing that misinformation, like even supposedly the IG.
I mean, Barr?
No, he was the AG.
Oh, okay.
No, what was his name? The IG of DOJ. I can't remember his name. I normally could say it in a heartbeat. But he apparently did not share with Durham even things that...
Well, his report was crazy and no one talked about it.
Yeah, no one talked about it. Yes, so it's a you know, unless the media starts, like I said, journalism's dead. Unless the media says we're going to be a neutral observer and we're going to report things, until they do that, we're just going to be in a world of hurt.
So what do you think is going to end up with Ukraine?
Well, you know, in the first instance, I thought, well, Ukraine could be a neutral.
Like Austria.
Like Austria, right. But then again, I thought, but they don't now. This will open a big wound. They won't trust the Russian Federation for the next 50 years as a result of this. So I don't know. I honestly think the Russians are losing this war. So I remember the first night of the invasion, the second night maybe, we were watching General Kane, retired, on one of the, probably Fox, and he said that they're going to take Kiev in a matter of hours or something like that. And I was sitting there with some friends and my wife, and I said, that ain't going to happen. And my wife was in a panic because she thought, oh, this general said that was going to happen. And I said, no, it's not going to happen because logistics is a bitch. Right? So logistics, getting the food and the fuel.
Anything.
I mean, you can make your first push, but then, you know, you got to get the fuel to the tanks, to the armored personnel carriers, the BMPs, to the rocket launchers. The fuel trucks get lost. They get blown up. They get stuck in the mud. You know, we are very good at logistics. The Russians have never been that good at logistics, which is why their small arms fight has been very bad. They are not winning the small arms unit level.
They fight different.
They're by their use of their rocket artillery and their air power, they can indiscriminately terrorize, and they can, you know, level an area. You know, I saw the video of the cluster bombs going off in a neighborhood of either, I think it was Kharkiv, and I thought, wow, I mean, this is obviously a residential neighborhood. I don't see any Ukrainian forces here, and you see the cluster bombs going off, you know, fired from a multiple rocket launcher somewhere, which, when you use it against a civilian, it's a war crime. So, I don't know. I don't think the Russians are doing well. I thought in the first instance that Putin would try to find a face-saving way out. That may still happen. He will say, oh, we've denazified Ukraine. They've agreed to become a neutral country. Maybe we get to keep Donbass, and they recognize Luhansk, and they get to keep Crimea. You know, we've achieved our goals, and he gets to say he won. But he's lost a ton of forces. He fired a general yesterday. And he's lost, 4 generals killed in action. If a general's going down to the line, that means there's problems. You know, generals should be back in the tactical operations center or the divisional operations center.
Shouldn't be in the risk of
directing the wider battle. They shouldn't be down there telling their troops how to make a right turn down this road versus that road. You know.
You know, I heard longer it takes, more crazy stories I can hear, right? Some people come with the idea, it's like, why are Americans, let's say, better or different when they also in history, let's say, fabricate reasons to go into certain wars, you know? And
you mean like invading Iraq
or Yugoslavia or Libya whatever, right?
Right. My wife asked this question.
The attacker, perfect. So maybe we'll do a very good answer.
I'm rehearsed.
Because very often the attacker will just find a reason why to do things, right? Same like Russians. Like, what would you say to people who will come with this question?
Well, a lot of the Russians that are watching RT and Первый канал are asking this question. They see no difference. They can't differentiate between going to Yugoslavia, for example, or going to Ukraine. To them, it's the same. Well, what did we do in Yugoslavia? We got all NATO together. We used a multinational institution called NATO. They voted. They went to the UN. They voted there. And then they went and did their operation, their bombing campaign, which was really bombing light. We were dropping basically these electrical blankets on their power grid stations in order to turn off their electric power. So there were non-destructive type of things. And then we also did bomb some of their, down in Kosovo, right? So we did do some of that. And then, and I'm mixing the two, right? So you had Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then you had Kosovo. But the difference is we used the multinational institutions to establish, and we announced that we're going to go there unless you, Serbia, do this, this, and this, and this. Same with Iraq. Take 1990, 1989, 1990, 91. We told Saddam, if you don't leave Kuwait, we're going to invade you. And then 6 months went by. The UN authorized the use of force. So we used the multinational institutions. And the same with...
How about Libya?
In Libya, though, that was NATO, and that was the Europeans. We got involved because the Dutch and the Italians and some others thought Muammar Gaddafi was really bad. So because it was NATO, the United States bombed. But that was probably one of the biggest mistakes of the Obama administration. That was a huge mistake, I think. It just destabilized the entire region. And
Europe.
Now you have weapons proliferation, right? A lot of Muammar Gaddafi's weapons have found their way to other places. So,
and plus Libya even was, let's say, on African standard, pretty developed country. Like,
say that again.
Like Libya was at the time when the destruction of the country came, was one of the more developed countries in Africa.
It was.
Right?
It was.
So it really destabilized the whole thing.
It really destabilized because they have tribal things already underneath the surface, but it was destabilizing.
I kind of feel people have to understand that every war is bad. Like, there's always innocent people dying, civilians dying, mothers dying, holding their kids. Doesn't matter where you're at. It's like all wars are just pure evil. And we always have to find the leaders that are able to stand up against all kind of psychopaths.
Like, aren't we glad that we fought a war against Adolf Hitler?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean,
like, I wouldn't be here.
There was no choice, right?
I wouldn't be here. I would be dead. I'm Slavic. Like,
or you'd be speaking German.
No, I would be dead.
Oh, you're Slavic?
Yeah,
oh, yeah, sorry.
I'm Slavic. I would be dead. Maybe if I would look like this with blue eyes, maybe I had a chance. But my grandfather would be dead. Like, there's no way I would make it. Maybe I would live in Siberia or something and I wouldn't even know any better. But the thing is, personally to me, I hate to see when Slavic people are killing each other.
Of course.
We are like one family. I can understand both. I could understand the topic they are talking about. They are fighting against each other and they are yelling to each other in almost same language.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
How can it be even possible?
And that's why I feel like this can kind of wake people up, even people who are sleeping until now, because they didn't care. For example, like some civilians in Syria or Libya or somewhere where they're killed, because they're just some random people.
They're uncivilized.
Yeah, they're uncivilized. They don't really care. But like all wars are bad. And like I really, really appreciate it if there is some certain politicians or leaders, because leaders doesn't have to be politicians. There can be very influential people, like, in the... Like Elon Musk is one of them. He's not. I love
Elon Musk.
I don't really believe he's like some certain evil, because with this money and power, and he could be doing like way, way worse things that he's actually doing. So like, and he's definitely a leader. Because
he's not greedy.
Well, yeah, I don't know him personally, but as much I can see from online, you know, like just the fact that he goes to podcast when he can be asked literally for anything, and he is there for 2 hours, and there's really no script, and he's smoking there weed with Joe Rogan. Like, I mean, that tells you
actually
something.
It'd be better if he were the president right now.
Yeah, right. I think so too, right? Yeah. Because I really wish that there would be more money and like power and all that coming into the development and discovering things and stuff like that instead of like a war. But this is utopia. There's
wars
no
are really are always bad almost. I mean, not all wars are evil, but they're always originally because of some evil somewhere, right? But again, it's always not a black and white thing, right? Because, for example, Russia had legitimate grievances in Ukraine, but they didn't have to invade. They could have used their influence, right? That's what they tried to do with Yanukovych, right? Yeah. Yanukovych was their little guy, and he got kicked out. So that really threw them off, the Orange Revolution. Yeah. So...
Well, that's another, you know, like this whole topic is just so deep because there's so many different interests in and also the Ukraine government is very corrupt.
Right, very corrupt.
The state is very poor. Russia is very corrupt, very poor. Yep. It's like completely different environment, but I just hate to see when the Slavic people are killing each other for profit and benefit to some other guys who are sitting thousands of kilometers away, and they don't even care about the area. They just care about outcome, and we don't even know what is the outcome. What it's supposed to be, right?
You're absolutely right. Yep.
Man, this is crazy.
It is crazy. We live in a crazy time. I sure hope that it gets better.
Yeah, the world is getting nuts.
My travel plans to Russia are on hold. I go normally once a year to Russia for 6 weeks, and don't even it's off the table for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think so. Well, last thing, because I don't want to hold you any longer. I really appreciated you took this time because
Sorry,
that's
a great.
This is a great discussion. This is really great. I'm really enjoying that. But I promised myself to ask you also about Afghanistan, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. What is your take on that? Like, what was done completely wrong? And do you think during the previous administration it would be the same?
Well, I'll just summarize the end.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So in the end, the first thing you never do is you never evacuate your military before you get your non-combatants out. It's like rule number 1. We have a thing called NEO, non-combatant evacuation operations. They occur while you have military presence in the country. So you don't close down your big air base until you get all the non-combatants out. And if the airfield in the city is no good, you don't use that one because you're a sitting duck there. You don't abandon the big air base until you get all your people out. Then you make sure you evacuate your materiel. So you get your guns, your helicopters, your everything out of there. And then when the Taliban or somebody offers you control of the city because of the collapse of the Afghan National Army, which frankly, we thought they were a good army, but it was, again, another case of bad leadership, right? Yeah. Corrupt leadership.
They just
the fighters were all pretty good, but without leadership, it all falls apart. So without compelling leadership. So when the Taliban offered us the ability to control Kabul until we were done, we should have taken the opportunity. Yeah. Instead, we said, no, we didn't want it. I don't know who to blame other than maybe Lloyd Austin, he was my commander at Central Command when I was there. I thought he was a pretty smart guy, but that was about the dumbest thing I've ever heard of between letting Bagram go before... I mean, Bagram was a defensible location. Yeah. And that was
I've been told that if U.S. would keep Bagram for good, they would be able to maintain the control in entire Afghanistan, because if there would be any problem, they could go from there, kill the problem, and come back.
Yeah, they could. Bagram was a logistics hub. I mean, it was like a fortress, right? With a lot of, nobody could get close to it unless we wanted them to get close to it. I mean, it's it was such a tragedy, actually, that I don't know. I'm sure I picture this is what happened in my mind. They told Biden, the military advisors, the NSC, told Biden what to do, and he just said, just get out of there. I'm sure he said, let's just do it quick. Let's just get out. And that decision was catastrophic. And, like Robert Gates says, he's known Joe Biden for decades, and he's always been wrong on every major foreign policy issue. And this was a huge military blunder on the part of our guys. And, why did not, I'm like that Marine Corps officer, why did not somebody offer to resign? I mean, the stupidity of letting go of Bagram before you have your non-combatants out of there, it's like glaring. I mean, it's so glaring. It's like you wonder.
It's crazy even that public couldn't even get over that.
Yeah.
Because that's like, why, right?
Why?
There is no
rational explanation.
It's crazy. And we were watching that in the news, and I just couldn't believe, because, it was truly like evacuation of Vietnam when you see the last chopper getting out and people are trying to climb on the planes and stuff. You're like, wow. So do you think that this also helped lower the trust in the U.S. Army and military
for
in the
sure.
world?
I think that created instability in a sense of, if you know your adversary's an idiot, you can take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. If you know Biden is going to make bad decisions, you're going to take advantage of it.
Do you think like this helped the Ukraine situation as well to escalate?
I mean, that's speculative.
Yeah.
But I would say right now, Vladimir Putin feels very secure knowing that Joe Biden will not do anything no matter what he does. I mean, it would take a lot. A couple rockets would have to land on a town in Poland for us to get involved at this point. So Putin knows that if he can stay within his certain limits, that he can do anything. He's got a green light.
How about Taiwan and China?
I have a different opinion about Taiwan. I think China would be stupid to invade Taiwan.
Really?
Yeah. How many miles are between the coast of Taiwan and the Chinese?
Less than U.S. and Cuba?
No, I think, isn't there more? I thought there was more. Oh, it's a good question. Well, having a sea, how many miles are between the United Kingdom and France?
No, not that much.
10 miles, right? So the German army couldn't get to Great Britain. The German army was gigantic and powerful. Couldn't get to Britain.
They couldn't control airspace.
They couldn't control the air?
Air.
Or the sea. So right now, China, if they try to take Taiwan, I mean, they could level it. They could make it flat, kill all the people, and then they could take it. But if they really wanted to take it, they'd be foolish to try to do it militarily, because they would lose so many soldiers trying to take Taiwan. It's so easy to stop an invasion. That's why we were so nervous about invading on D-Day. Yeah, that's why we created our disinformation campaign to make them think we're going to invade by Calais. And we picked the safest place down here in Normandy, where there was virtually no German forces to start with. And even there, we almost...
Yeah, man, they were just random, just waiting, guys who were recovering from Russia.
Yeah.
They were like all these panzer divisions just randomly chilling there, vacationing, and then all of a sudden invasion. And they're like, damn, and those guys were no joke, because, they just came from Soviet Union. You know? They probably came, rescue them from Stalingrad or something. They were still recovering them.
If those panzer divisions had been, if those SS divisions had been close enough to Normandy, it would have had a different outcome. So it's very hard to invite. I mean, Taiwan is armed to the teeth, right? And they have capabilities that the Chinese, they have good capabilities. They're not like, they're not like Ukraine. They will be able to shoot down planes and missiles and things.
It's a different situation. Yeah,
it's a different situation.
But, man, definitely like.
But does China feel emboldened?
Oh,
maybe China feels emboldened.
This whole thing definitely didn't help anything. The Afghanistan failure didn't help anything.
No.
It maybe did not cause that much harm, but it definitely didn't help anything. Like it's the failure. Even as I said, even the civilians, when they were watching that, they were like, "What are you doing? This is like the U.S. Army. We are like counting." And the same way people think about Russians nowadays. They're like, "Oh my God, they should already like take over the entire country by now, right?" You would think like a country of these capabilities would do that, and they're still not able to do that, So you feel like, who are the main like global powers? Like those guys fail out there, those guys are doing this thing out there, like what's going on, So you kind of feel like that the situation just is not clear
Yeah, it's not clear.
Anywhere you look.
Ambiguity. We have a phrase we use in the Army War College. They teach it to us, but we use it everywhere. It's called VUCA. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So all these problems are volatile.
Yeah.
The environment is volatile.
Yeah.
They're ambiguous, or they're uncertain. They're complex. They're very complex problems, and they're ambiguous. It's hard to find a solution to a lot of these issues. I feel bad in a way. I'm retired now. I feel like I have no influence.
Would you serve under this command?
Pardon?
Would you serve under this command right now?
I would not serve in the current army. No, not under Lloyd Austin and not under Joe Biden. No.
You know, it's crazy because the difference between public opinion in US and Europe is so big. People in Europe, they still believe that, let's say, Barack Obama administration was the best thing that happened to US.
Oh yeah, they're
as I told you, since sliced bread. They don't really. They think.
Well, it's because they're indoctrinated, right? All of their media is
just
pretty
don't
much
have the information
left of center.
Every time I'm talking about those kind of things with Americans, especially Americans who are, let's say, 50 and up, they're telling me a different story.
Yeah.
You know, and they are telling me like about like how those politicians are just all talk, no action, how they are able to speak nicely even about like terrible things, but their life didn't really get any better, or there was no really major change in the world or in their domestic policy, you know. So I'm not really surprised by that statement that you would not want to serve under this command.
No, I wouldn't want to. I mean, I would like to do something, but I wouldn't. I have a friend who lives in Austria. He writes books, and his wife works for Doctors Without Borders. Okay. And we had many similar discussions, because in her mind, America's America, you know, we're all like this big superpower, so powerful, blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, no, it's different. It's more complex than that now. It's more we're not as strong as we used to be, and our economic power is failing, and you know, it's we live in a different time.
That's the thing, you know. They are comparing different United States to
different eras.
Situation, you know. So I was interviewing a couple of months ago a World War II veteran, and the guy was in the Battle of the Bulge, and he got captured, and then he was in German camps and so on. And when you talk to him, there's something more about him than just him as a guy. He carries with himself part of that United States from back then.
That's how I feel.
You know?
Yeah. I feel this is not a country I recognize right now. The America that I grew up in is so different than this version of America, whatever version this is.
I asked him, like, when was the last time he was in Europe, and he told me it was in 1945.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. No, I love Europe. You know, that's the funny thing. I love Europe.
Yeah, you served there,
I served there. I've 6.5 years of my life there. I love Europe. I just don't, I'm not a big fan of the EU because of the loss of sovereignty.
Yes.
You know, forcing Poland or Hungary or, you know,
I'm on your side.
To do things that they don't want to do. That is not where, that's undemocratic. It's unpluralistic.
Yeah. Well, people always know the best how to live in their own country.
Exactly.
And they can cooperate with other countries. They can have free trade, free movement of people, whatever. But I will never agree that some guy in Portugal knows how to live in north of Sweden.
Yes.
There's no way. And it doesn't matter under what organization you belong. Like, you as a European, you have to always know what your nationality is.
Because it's still tribal, right?
Yeah.
Life in Portugal is very different than life in Poland.
You guys don't even eat the same thing.
Yeah.
you just cannot be on the same diet like someone who sees the sun 2 hours a day.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
You know, so even this thing, you know, you spent in Europe 6.5 years in Germany, but also you told me that you were 1 year in NATO headquarters.
Yeah, year and a half.
Like, how life-changing after all those experiences in Iraq and all of those things that you experienced and, you know, seen was that experience? When
I went through a custody battle, the custody evaluator, who was a secular Jewish woman, PhD psychologist, she said to me, you know, you're so educated, you're so you know, you lived in Europe and all this stuff. And the truth is, I've grown living in Belgium and living in Germany. And I love the European people I know, and I still have friends over there. So I I enjoy it. It's just like here, there's pros and cons. I love the way of life in Europe, you know. I don't love the fact that there's more, but we're finding it here now. And I asked my friend Christian this in Austria. I said, you know, why is it that Europeans always do things in big group think ways? Communism, socialism, fascism, you know, why is it always like the movement in Europe, you know?
Because it's small. Europe is small. It spreads so quickly, man.
Yeah. Whereas in America, we're more like individual thinkers, you know, or at least
that's the old idea.
We used to be that way.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the mass movement kind of thing, you know?
Because the internet connects you closer.
Yeah.
Because the country, Europe is so tiny compared to US. It's so tiny. It doesn't look like it, but it's very tiny. You can go over my entire country if the roads are good in like 4 hours, 5 hours. If the road would be like here, I could make it through like in 3.5 hours across. Here in 3.5 hours, I barely get on the East Coast. This country is so big, but because of internet, it got connected more.
It does.
And people are able to spread information more. But Europe...
Right.
In Europe, it used to be that you drive 4 hours that way and you speak different language and use different currency.
You're in Germany or whatever, yeah.
You know?
Or in Poland, in your case.
Yeah, in my case, I'm in the heart of the Europe. Like, I'm right in the center. So for me, going anywhere 4 hours is different language. But here, it's the same kind of thing. So I understand. I think like the world is speeding up and the distances are getting shorter. Also, the information and ideologies are able to spread more. But thankfully, people don't even listen those as much. Like CNN has like... Their ratings are going, you know, I mean, the most influential media.
By the way, I'm so disappointed in CNN. I used to watch CNN.
Everybody.
And I used to watch MSNBC, and I used to watch, I used to read the New York Times, and I used to subscribe to both the New York Times and the Washington Post. I don't do any of it anymore. They're just so unreliable, and they're so into their own, they are lost in their own bias. Yeah. So...
They listen their own thing and they present it as a truth, but as we talked before, there's always two sides, and they are based on something.
And there are nuances. There are nuances in things. There's complexity to information. There's, you know, there's.
Well, I kind of feel more optimistic about that because
I hope so.
I see
somebody needs to.
I mean, the most influential media right now is Joe Rogan and his podcast. He has 13.5 million listeners per episode, and CNN in their prime time is having like 700,000 viewers.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
So I mean, people are clearly searching for something more unscripted and
like,
more
look at Rogan.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great example.
Yeah, literally a guy with a microphone who did over 1,000, 1,500 episodes, and people, they know, they see him during everything. I mean, you know, he does crazy stuff.
And he's using common sense.
Yeah, and he's curious, and he asks it. And that's why I hate when they try to cancel him recently. But at the same time, I love it because he's someone you cannot cancel. Because the people out there know him so well because they spend thousands of hours watching him.
Yeah.
And on top of that, if he feels like burping, he's gonna burp in the podcast. If he feels like, oh, I want to roll a weed and roll a joint and talk about flat Earth, I'm gonna do that. Right. And people know that this guy has nothing to hide, so he's able to.
People appreciate a straight shooter.
Yeah, and on top of that, he's always gonna invite someone who will just speak the not truth, but whatever opinion feels like.
Right.
So you kind of feel it's not paid.
Yeah.
You know?
I like the fact that they tried to cancel him and it just gave them more viewers. More viewers.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
That was great.
It's great. Well, I hope it was good. I actually have a neighbor who is a platoon leader in Vietnam. If you're interested, I will hook you up.
Sure I am.
Yeah.
I also remember you told me that you know some people who escaped because of Taliban from
Oh, well, I know some people from Iraq.
Iraq, yes.
Iraq, yeah.
That would be great.
I'll connect you.
Well, thank you very much.
And I'll connect you with my Iraqi family.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're awesome people, actually. I went to an Iraqi wedding. It was like
wedding?
The wildest thing I've ever seen. Like beating drums and, you know.
Iraq, well... Yeah, you got to experience the culture, you know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And
sorry I talked too much again.
That's all good.